To go deeper into our episodes, please visit the show notes in your podcast app. Or, to get a fuller unedited experience, go find this episode on spotlightonpodcast.com. There, the notes are packed with links to resources that give you more about the people and topics explored here. Hello and welcome to Spotlight On, a production of 23 Media Ventures. I'm your host, Lawrence Purrier. Today, the spotlight shines on musician and producer David John Haskins, who's better known to the world as David J., bassist and co-founder of post-punk goth band Bauhaus, as well as Love and Rockets. As if having such a luminary visit the podcast isn't enough, today's talk is guest hosted by Spotlight On producer Michael Donaldson, who filled in for me for this and another special episode we'll be telling you about very soon. David came by to talk about Tracks from the Attic on Independent Project Records, his career-spanning triple album made up of home demos recorded between 1984 and 2004, tracks he personally selected for inclusion. He also discussed the Love and Rockets tour opening for Jane's Addiction, which kicks off this week, and a lot of very, very interesting esoterica. Enough from me. Let's now turn it over to Michael Donaldson in conversation with David J.
So I'm gonna dive right into Tracks from the Attic, because I find this a fascinating thing, and there's a lot to talk about. I guess it would be 3 CDs. Is the physical release, is it 3 discs?
It's vinyl as well. The main thing is the vinyl, really.
Mm-hmm. How many records is it then? 3?
3.
It's really cool. I'm kind of one of those people that I love to hear raw recordings and demos and things like that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm just really into that as someone who records demos myself. It's just really interesting to hear the creative process. I mean, the creative process obviously comes out in these things. What's crazy to me is this is between 1984 and 2004. These are recorded, correct?
Yes.
It's wild how it holds together. Like, I couldn't really guess which is which so much.
I suppose I have a sustained singular vision.
Yeah, of course. Like, how did you sequence this?
Really chronological. Initially, it's chronological. And then when we had the years, and then we put it together as a sequence, a flow. I think it's really crucial. Maybe it's becoming a bit of a lost art, but I think that the way you sequence an album, it's an integral component to the way that you receive the music. You can tell a story, and you set up one track with the previous track. And I do it the same with just playing a live set. I think really hard about connections and links between tracks, and you're telling a story.
I also managed a record label for a while, and the sequence I did for this artist, I had nothing to do with the music, but I did the sequencing on the album, and the sequence I put together I'm as proud of that creatively as anything else I've done. So I was so happy with the sequence and the overused word journey that it would take the listener on from beginning to end. Yeah, it's such a lost. Well, I don't think it's a lost art. I think
it got a little bit lost for a while. Now it's coming back.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with that, which is really great. Are you leaving off demos on this? Are there things left off, or is this like
There's a few things. We are slipping those out as downloads and special tracks. Yeah, there's not much that's been excluded.
So you're cleaning house then with this?
You could look at it that way, yeah.
So the story is you had a friend who offered to digitize these old demos.
Gabor Nemeth in Budapest. He was aware that I had these literally shoe boxes, two shoe boxes full of cassettes, and he volunteered to digitize them. So I just shipped them out to him, and he did a really nice job, did a little bit of mastering and made files. So I had all these, as a trove. And when I was approached by Bruce and Jeff at Independent Project Records, and they were asking if I had anything along the lines of demos and unreleased tracks, I said, yeah, actually, I've got quite a lot of that. And I just sent it their way, and they really liked it. And I was surprised they wanted to do 3 albums. I just thought they'd cherry pick and make 1 album, but they really liked it and were keen to do 3.
How did you know Bruce? I'll say as a preface to that question, I'm a longtime fan of his label and Savage Republic and all that. So
Yeah, there's a mutual friend, Brooke Rush, who has known Bruce for a while. I was aware of Bruce, but I didn't know him. I'm more aware of him as a designer,
Mhm.
and a brilliant one at that. Yeah, I contacted Bruce via Brooke, and he just thought that we should be in touch, and he thought that we could possibly work together, and we did. I submitted a track for a sampler collection. That was a nice collection, and then did quite well. And then Bruce and Jeff wanted to work with me more extensively. Then they asked if I had anything along the lines of what I just described.
Knowing about him and his design, which I'm a huge fan of as well, I'm not surprised that he would want to do 3 discs, vinyl, whatever, just because I know how elaborate packaging, or not so much elaborate packaging, but just very beautiful packaging, would be a better way to put it, is really important to the label's aesthetic.
Yeah.
And I've seen photos of the package for the release, and yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
It's such a great document. It's just so cool that you record these demos over the years that are sitting on cassette tapes, and now they're a part of this really beautiful package. That must just be just like a really wonderful surprise.
Yeah, I just never envisaged that they would be released.
Does the appearance of these demos keep them from becoming finished, well, not finished, but, band songs on future albums or records?
No, actually, last week I went into the studio and re-recorded 3 tracks with a full band and did a full production job, and it turned out really well. And this will be part of an EP that will come out next year, early next year, on the same label.
Great.
And made up possibly with a couple of live versions of these, what were previously demo songs, and maybe a track from a radio session I did recently that turned out quite well. So no, I have, returned to the attic, as it were.
Do you consider yourself a nostalgic person? Does this make you nostalgic listening?
Yeah, I am nostalgic. Yeah, I am nostalgic and romantic, but I'm always moving on. That's why these things get left behind. I don't wallow in nostalgia, but I enjoy it occasionally. Dip in.
I think about this all the time because I have my own old band recordings that now and then I revisit, and I don't know. It's very strange to be thinking sometimes of, should I revisit these or just completely move forward?
Yeah, I hardly ever play my own stuff. I record it, and then I have maybe a week where I play it a lot, and then I completely move on. I often hear my music coming at me out of the blue, like on the radio or in a restaurant, and sometimes, quite often, I don't recognize it, and my friends sort of give me a nudge and they say, "Hey," and what? It's like, "Hey, it's this." Yeah, what is this? And they think I'm putting them on, but I'm not. I'm like, I don't know what this is.
Are you like, I don't know what this is, this sounds great, or?
Often, yeah, quite often. I am quite pleasantly surprised. Yeah.
So one thing I'm fascinated about listening to the album, the demos, I've noticed in a few occasions, it's almost like you are making notes about the full production of the songs. Like I'm thinking about Blackmail when you say fade out and then come back into this. And then the gunshot sounds with your mouth on the badge of lead.
That's exactly what they are. They're just notes. They're my notes. They're little sketches. It's mnemonic devices not intended in the moment of recording them for public consumption. It's just for my working process.
So the question then is, when you write or writing these songs, are you also thinking in terms of how the production might sound?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can hear it very clearly in my head. Quite often when I write the lyrics, I'll put notes in the margin as to instruments here and what they are and where they should come in.
Songwriter, just what the world needs now. Oh geez, another singer-songwriter screeching like a scatterbrained crow. Oh share with you. Even though you might not really want to hear it, he's gonna lay it on you, 'cause he's the songwriter. This is my life in 27 verses, each line torn from my heart, with a subtext that bears the inscription, hey, don't you think that I'm smart? Signed the songwriter.
I'm taken by some of the song titles. I love creative song titles, and you have a plethora of creative song titles on this. Say Small Death of a Broken Doll, I love. If Muzak Be the Chunk Food of Love. Do you have a set way? Do you have a list of titles that inspire lyric songs? Do you start with the lyrics that bring you to the titles? Is there a process?
Not a fixed process. Sometimes I'll think of a title, or I will receive a title. I'll overhear a conversation, or I'll read something in a book and a newspaper article, and it just hits me. Oh, that would be a good title. Or more often than not, in conversation with somebody, and they'll say something, or I'll say something, and it immediately appears to me as that's a title. And quite often I'll say in the midst of the conversation, oh, that's a song title, and I'll write it down,
Mm-hmm.
And then if it's particularly arresting, that'll stay in my noggin, and it'll gestate, and it will produce a full lyric. So quite often the lyric comes just from the title and what the title is suggesting.
I like that. So the regular host of this podcast is very obsessed with titles, and he talks a lot to jazz musicians, instrumental musicians about their titles. It's very interesting how different musicians have different attitudes toward titles. Some it's very important. They're trying to convey something, or they're trying to suggest the baggage of an image to someone who's listening to the music, while others just couldn't give a shit,
I really care about the title.
Yeah. So even on instrumental songs, titles would be very important for you.
And the title colors the perception of whatever it is you're listening to. It's like a painting. When you title a painting or a piece of visual art, then you point it. And I understand having the title being untitled, because then the viewer can come to it without any pointers, without any little sort of indicators as to how they should interpret this. So they interpret it from their own psyche.
Did you always have a recorder with you?
No. Now I do, see. I have my phone. The reason the demo stopped in 2004 is that's when I switched to using the phone. And it's so much better. And also what is great about it is that I can record these demos, which I'm doing all the time on my phone, and then I can send them to the musicians instantly, anywhere in the world.
Yes.
So that's great.
But let's say you have that now, but before then...
Before, I'd have to just sort of carry it in my head, or I would play it on the guitar, but I wouldn't have a device to record it on, and I would just have to wait until I did.
Right.
Somebody would have a cassette player. I didn't take one on tour with me.
Oh, really?
So I came up with a song on tour, then I'd have to retain it. And some of those butterflies flew away. But I think that's, it's sort of like the ones that survived are the strong ideas. And I would have that attitude. I think, I think this is really good. And the proof of the pudding will be if I can still remember this when I get home from tour in 3 weeks. If it's dissipated, then it's not worth pursuing anyway.
I remember seeing an interview with Tom Waits, and he told this story about how he'd be in his car and he'd start getting a little melody and some lyrics in his head, and he'd have no way to do anything about it. So he would yell, "Not now, go bother someone else."
I know, I read that quote, and it's brilliant. Yeah, I totally agree with it. Sometimes so inconvenient being inspired.
Did you have any tricks or anything to help you remember if that would happen to you?
Yeah, and I use this when I'm trying to memorize lyrics, and I'm very visual thinking anyway, so I'll just come up with visual images connected with the lyrics. I will see images.
Like a memory palace, if you've heard of that.
I haven't, but I like that.
It's like a way of remembering things where you visualize like a grocery list, and you visualize your house And it's like, okay, well, the soda pop is over here, or this is over here. And you sort of put things in places.
Yeah.
And then when you go to the grocery store, you can walk through your house in your mind and see all the things you needed to get. I think I'm butchering that, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about this, about your relationship with candles. It comes up a lot when I was researching for this and reading old interviews with you.
Yeah.
Candles as you're writing, candles as you're doing shows.
Candles are very important to me. I think if I was stranded in the wilderness, I didn't have any food or drink, it was cold and I was lost, I think I could survive longer if I had a candle with me. I could light it in the dark. I think there's some magic to that. There's that glow. It's a very magical thing for me, the candle. Light the candle. It's also ritualistic when I'm writing a song. I get very frustrated if I'm somewhere and I don't have a candle and I've got an idea for a song. I really need that candle. I need to light that candle, just have that little glow there. It attracts the muse.
So if you light a candle when you don't have a song idea, does that help you spur something on?
No.
Really? See, that's interesting. Because a lot of writers obviously have similar things. And I think some use candles as well. And it's sort of like, okay, this is the 3 hours of the day that I'm writing. So let me light this candle or start this drone sound.
And it doesn't apply to me. Like if I'm writing prose, it doesn't apply at all. It's only songs.
Okay. So let me dig into this a little bit. The muse arrives. It's almost like you're honoring the muse by lighting the candle.
It is that, but it's more than that. And it's mysterious. I don't really quite understand it.
I don't think it would work if you understood it.
Yes, good point. I don't know. It's become part of the ritualistic process for me. And I just like it. I use candles all the time. Just when I'm relaxing or when I'm listening to music, I love to light a candle, listen to other artists' music, you know. Apparently Leonard Cohen was the same. Well, I was actually on my way to Montreal the night he passed. And there was some problem with my papers because they just changed the laws and you had to have this particular paper and loads of musicians got caught with it. And it kind of happened overnight. And I was on my way to play a show up there. And I actually got to the airport and they wouldn't let me get on the plane because I didn't have this piece of paper. So I went back home and got the news that Leonard had died. I'm a huge Leonard fan. And at the time I was living with my wife, Annie. She's a huge Leonard Cohen fan. So it was very lovely that we could be together and just light a candle for Leonard and be together and play Leonard Cohen music. And then I went back. I managed to rebook and I went back and played like a week later. And I wanted to go down to Leonard's house and light a candle for him. And I was staying a long way away from where he lives. But I didn't want to get in a car. I didn't want to go on a bus. I felt like I should walk miles so that I was distant from his house because it was just appropriate because of what I was doing. So I walked all that way. And then I thought, oh, well, I don't have a candle, but I'll find one on the way. And there would be a store with a candle. And there wasn't. And I kept going closer and closer and closer. And I could see the house. I don't have a candle. So I just went in the store. He sold lamps, odd objects. And I just said, do you have any candles? And he says, oh, yes, we have candles. And he had quite a lot of candles. And he said, why are you buying this candle? I said, because I want to light it for Leonard Cohen. He said, Leonard came in here all the time and all he would buy was candles.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
We'll be back with more Spotlight On right after this break. If you enjoyed this episode of Spotlight On, please share us with a friend and leave a review or star rating on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks. And now, back to Spotlight On.
Also about the ritual aspect of the candles and everything. I noticed you sometimes describe yourself as a musician-magician.
Yeah.
Which I know is a little, maybe a little cheeky there, but...
It's cheeky and it's also sincere.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. I know that magic does play a role in your thinking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And perhaps your creativity as well.
Oh, definitely.
How does it affect your creativity?
It's a matter of being open and receptive and attuned to inspiration that can come from events that could be perceived as disastrous or accidents, things going wrong. That's what I'm attuned to. And that's where the magic lies. Like Leonard Cohen said, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. When those things happen, then these are gifts. And I love that. So that's one aspect of magic. There's all sorts of aspects, but that's a good one. I mean, when you sort of tune into that kind of thing, it seems to happen more often. The accidents happen more often. But there are things happening all the time. There are sounds going on that when you're attuned to this frequency, you notice just sort of random sounds and events. Although I'm focused on maybe a practical endeavor in the studio, part of me is also attuned to this other level of consciousness all the time. And I'll hear things that a lot of people in the studio won't hear. And I'll say, oh, what's that? What are you talking about? I hear something outside, a sound. Some machinery is making a hum, and it's somehow connecting with what I'm working on. It's resonating. So then I mic up whatever it is making that hum and introduce it into the process. And I see Brian Eno, I think, is very attuned to this. And his oblique strategy cards.
Here, hang on.
Are very.
I always have one right on my desk.
Right. There they are. Yeah. And I use those quite a bit. I've used them for years and years. And I love that, when you just take a card and depending on your state of mind or what you're doing, you have a particular interpretation in that moment, and then you apply it to your work.
So this is something I call creative games, and you're actually touched on a bit of an obsession of mine. First of all, let me also say, based on what you were just saying, I always believe that if you're attuned enough that you start noticing things that could be interpreted as coincidences, it means you're on the right track.
Yes.
Yeah, the idea of the creative game is something that when I was in college, I can't remember how I happened across it, probably because I was learning about William Burroughs and all that type of stuff. And I happened across the guide to the cut-up method, The Third Mind.
Yes.
And just the idea of two people working together create a third mind.
Yes.
But if you don't have that other person, then inserting randomness or creative games also creates that third mind. As a concept I love. And yeah, the oblique strategies are part of that. And I also read that it was your idea to apply the exquisite corpse on Sky's Gone Out to music.
Yes.
That is such a success, how that worked out.
Yeah, and we did it 3 times. Bauhaus did it 3 times. And the last time was just a few years ago. And we produced a track that was really effective using that technique.
Are there any other things that you use that are similar in your creative process, like with introducing randomness or creating situations where those accidents can happen?
Sometimes I will, I'll record something, a couple of tracks, and then I'll record something blind. I'll record an additional instrument or instruments without hearing what I've done. But it's going on top of what I've just recorded. So it's completely random and free form. And then you play it back, and then it's amazing the results that can come from that. How things just fall into place. When you hear it, you swear that, oh, all these parts have been played whilst listening to the other parts because they relate. They just work so well. But I love that random element.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens, right?
Yeah. It's like the Beatles did that with Tomorrow Never Knows, putting all those tape loops together and also applying the random element there in that they didn't even purposely select them. They just cut up a tape and put it into a box and then just pulled out the tape bits and they're spliced together. And then you played it back over the main tracks. That's a good example.
Yeah, the radio bits were supposedly just what was on the radio as they had the tape.
I've done
rolling.
that as well. Yes, I've just tuned in the radio, and now it's great because you have such a broader palette. I have this one app called Soundgarden, which is brilliant. I actually discovered that via Brian Eno. One of my favorites that I've used on quite a few tracks now was the one that he was talking about, that he was saying is his favorite, or one of his favorites, and it's out of Russia, chanting monks.
Yes.
So the monks are there for you whenever you need them, and they always come through. And he's just in the moment. Just record whatever's on this, it's going to come through. Last time I used it was on the Night Crickets, the new Night Crickets album, and it worked so well. It's spooky.
One of my favorite things to do is I've been collecting sounds forever. And I have this folder of just audio files of all these different sounds, whether drum loops, instruments, nature sounds, whatever. I worked with a friend who knows about programming to create like a little Apple script that'll go in this folder and randomly pull out a sound. If I'm feeling blocked, my kind of creative game is I'll pull 3 sounds at random out of this, and I have to make them work together as a song. And I always come up with something, and I can take the sound, the original sounds, they can be removed once I'm done, and I'm left with this song.
Yeah.
And it's a song that wouldn't have existed otherwise if I hadn't done this creative game. And
yeah, that's great. You see, it's restrictive, and that kind of restriction can also be very inspiring.
I think it's always inspiring. Constraints are always inspiring.
Constraints, minimize your options, I've got a concert coming up next week in New York. It's a tribute concert for Genesis P-Orridge.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's the premiere of a new documentary about Genesis.
Oh, great.
She is still here, but she is S-he. Here is a dash, so that it's her, and here. It's quite clever. And it's a great documentary, and I'm featured in that. And then the next night, there's going to be this big tribute concert with ex-members of Psychic TV, and Genesis's daughter is involved in it. And I'm doing a performance with Douglas Rushkoff.
Oh, great. Who was also a member of Psychic TV for a little bit.
Yes, he was. Yeah. Brilliant man. We've been talking about utilizing a random element in this piece that is called Memorial for a Dream Walker. Genesis once told me that his magical name was Dream Walker. I had this very profound, very vivid dream about Jen, and that I was at a memorial for Genesis. And I'm going to tell the dream, as it were. It's something that I was struck by, which is quite eerie in a way. I think that the memorial in my dream is actually the event I'm going to be attending next week, because it is a memorial. But I wanted to introduce an element that maybe Genesis could come through. We're working on that, Douglas and I, and
Genesis would be the third mind.
Exactly. We'd be creating the third mind. Genesis would be speaking beyond the grave, as it were. But I just got this little thing, which I haven't. It's this ghost box used to tune in to frequencies that are apparently conducive to the interaction with the dead.
I love it.
So I'm going to look into that. But beyond that, what we're going to do is this piece lasts for about 7 minutes. After every 1 minute, there's going to be 23 seconds, 23 being a very significant number to Jen and William Burroughs, as I'm sure you know. The duration of 23 seconds in which to introduce random elements. And I'd like to use this device in that repeated 23-second sections. But also Douglas is putting together some sounds, random sounds, and some sort of system that produces random noise. We're still putting all this together, but we're working very much in that area for this event.
That's exciting. And I'm a 23 baby. I was born on March 23rd, so there you go.
Okay.
Before positive was a negative, and magic had to die. Before San Francisco fell into the sun, and the porno queens turned on their heels to run. Before an erection was a lethal gun. When no one died from blood brotherhood, and no one cried for youth. Science made us feel this with a pill, and making love was not a way to kill. And Warren Beatty led us over the hill.
Speaking of dreams, do you get songs and dreams?
That has happened a couple of times. Yeah. And quite often in the dream, this music and this song appears to be amazing. And then when you go and work it out, there's nothing to it. There's nothing. It's not amazing. Occasionally it is, very occasionally. I know Paul McCartney said, like
I think yesterday was from a dream where, the famous story, he would play Yesterday for people because he was certain that it was something that had infected his head.
Yeah. Also, Ian McCulloch said that the whole of Killing Moon came to him in a dream.
Oh, wow.
The lyric and everything.
I had a band when I was in my early 20s, and I actually had a dream that Lou Reed gave me a song. It was very weird. We were in a car and he was driving to calm me down. He sings me this song. And I woke up and hit record on the recorder and sang it. The next morning I woke up, I was like, did that really happen? I'd hit the recorder and there it was. And my band did the song.
Oh, okay. And did it?
It was okay. It was cool. It's nothing I'd probably do after my early 20s, but yeah, it was okay.
And
I just saw there's the Love and Rockets tour was just announced with Jane's Addiction.
Jane's Addiction, yes.
That's exciting.
It is exciting. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it because we took them on tour with us in 90.
Yes, I do remember. So I went to college in North Louisiana for a little while, which you can have pity on me for that if you'd like. You played in New Orleans with Jane's Addiction opening.
Tipitinas.
Yes, which was my favorite venue in the world at the time. And I can't remember why I didn't go, but 3 of my closest friends all went down and saw it.
Yeah, that tour was great for us. And we became firm friends with the guys in Jane's. We got really well with them. It was really the first time that we really bonded with the opening act.
Nice.
Such a degree that we would hang out in each other's dressing rooms before playing, and we'd hang out afterwards back at the hotels, and we just became great buddies and have stayed friends, have great mutual respect. We played on each other's records. It seems like a very natural fit, and it's very nice to be offered this gig from the offer came from them.
That's really cool. I want to talk about the bass guitar.
Yes.
Dub as an influence. I want to bring this up because I have some favorite bass lines. And one of my favorite bass lines of all time that pops in my head when I least expect it and loops around is the dub coda to She's in Parties.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if that coda were like 2 hours long, I would be the happiest person in the world to just listen to that.
When we played that live, we'd always improvise around that section. I loved doing that, just going out there. It was never the same twice.
How was dub as an influence for you?
Huge. I was into reggae anyway. Reggae was really the first music I was really into.
Oh, really?
First album I ever bought was, with my own money, was Trojan Reggae Chartbusters Volume 2. Shortly followed by Volume 1, I went back. That was pre-dub. And it was great being in England at that time because there was a lot of reggae around. And
a lot of great reggae productions around, too.
Yeah. West Indian immigrants coming in the 50s and established themselves and their families, and they brought that music with them. And it mutated a bit in England. But also the stuff coming out of Jamaica in the 70s was incredible. Someone like Lee Scratch Perry, brilliant, innovative producer, and many others, King Tubby. When dub happened, it was so exciting. And I would always look at the record album credits, and a name that I'd see time and time again as the bass player was Errol Flabber Holt. He's the man. And he's still around. He hasn't changed the strings on his bass apparently for 6 decades. Like me, I haven't changed my strings since we played Coachella in 2005. You get that nice round. It's pleasingly dull.
It's almost like a spirit to the string too.
Oh, there's mojo in there. But I love it. And I think, again, we're referencing Brian Eno quite a lot here, but I think he made an accurate comment when he described dub as being truly abstract music. And it's a process. You have a starting point and then you take away. It's kind of like sculpture in a way. You take away from it. You don't add, you take away. But in the taking away, you are creating something that's very pleasing. I don't know what it is. I've had this conversation with Daniel about echo. Why is that so pleasing?
My favorite sound in the world is a tape delay, like filtering out.
Something, I don't know. It's something very deep, I think. It's biological. I don't know. It sort of connects with brainwaves.
So I imagine that's very important to you as a music producer, since you're doing a lot of production for other people, as far as the dub aesthetic and the idea of taking things away.
Sure. Yeah, I do apply that a lot. Yeah.
Hey, it's Michael. I want to quickly interrupt this interview to give you some context for something we're about to talk about. In 2019, David J. and Peter Murphy and their band came to Orlando to perform Bauhaus's album In the Flat Fields, and Peter Murphy didn't show up. And it was his second time in a row as a no-show for a concert in Orlando. So David J. and the remaining band accepted the challenge and took to the stage for what David J. told the audience was Bauhaus in dub. And they gave a great show. Even with Peter Murphy as a no-show, the audience was really into it. I don't think anyone left disappointed. And as you'll hear when we continue the conversation, it led to something remarkable.
Where are you?
I'm in Orlando.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. And the last time I saw you was you did the dub version of the Bauhaus set at the Plaza.
Oh, yes. When Mr. Murphy was not present again.
For the second time.
The second time. And that was the origin of a new band, Shiva Says. And we've got an album all recorded.
Really?
Weeks ago. I mean, that band.
They were great.
Together on the night. I knew that was a band after about 15 minutes. It came to my head, this is a band. It's a new thing.
Everyone was astonished.
Oh my God.
I was like, wait a minute. This is impromptu?
Totally impromptu. Didn't know that was going to happen until 10 minutes before it happened, literally. And then my directive to them was deconstruct, dub, just go out there. We had that spark between us, it's evident. So we decided to carry on and create new music, which is exactly what we did. They're out in Texas, just outside of Austin. So I went out there. They'd already laid down some loops and drum tracks and some ideas. And that was really, this would be interesting to you, because it was a bit of a magic thing going on and weird. In that I hadn't heard any tracks. I didn't want to hear any tracks till I got to them. And I had a bass and I was going to play the bass, do all the bass lines. And so I said to them, I don't even want, it's really weird. I can't explain this. It's uncanny. But I started to work out the bass lines before hearing the track. And then I said, okay, let's record. And they'd roll the track. And I'd play this bass line that I just worked out. And every time it went perfectly. It was in tune. It was in the right key. It was the right feel. And so I was just like, and I was like, sort of thinking, well, this is freaky.
You're on the right track.
Really in the zone. Like this happened 8 times. All the bass lines are just my first time hearing the track and the first time playing to it. And they just went down. So they were looking at me like, what's going on? So that was really weird. And then I was approached by an event that happens every year in New York called Performer. It's like an art event that happens over a 2-week period in different venues. It's very well put together, and they have a theme every year. Yoko Ono is one of the organizers. Laurie Anderson's involved in it. And we were invited to end the whole event, grand finale. And the theme was, appropriately enough, 100 years of Bauhaus. This was in 2019. Bauhaus was formed in 1919. Because I was in the midst of working with Rona and Kurz on this Shiva Saves, that's who I pulled together to do this. I don't know if you're aware of this single that I put out on 4AD in 1981 with Rene Halkepet.
Right, the Nothing More.
Yeah, oh, you know it, okay.
Yeah.
So Rene being one of the original students at the Bauhaus in Weimar in the 20s. And then he was a poet and a painter, broadcaster, and a lot of other things. I took his original cassette, actually, the cassette recordings of his voice. We cut that up, randomized it, reused it in a different context, and flew it in over this improvised music. We did a whole set of improvised music. I had a credible Butoh performer, Evangeline, and I designed this costume for her, like based on the Bauhaus mechanical ballet costumes from the 20s. And she was a very integral part of this whole thing. The idea was that it was going to be the history of the Bauhaus from its inception, going through its destruction or attempted destruction by the Nazis. So the Second World War comes in, and then post-war, and then its lasting influence and bringing it into now and the future. So all of that was enacted by Butoh and the music and projections and lights. And it was a continual piece of music, just over an hour. And that went great. And in the audience that night was Nick Zinner from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. And he was blown away by it. And he said they'd like to work with us. So he's on 8 tracks on this album. And he played some great stuff. It's very kind of trip hop, industrial trip hop and dub. I sent a couple of tracks to Adrian Utley from Portishead. He plays on it. Adam White from Morrissey's band plays on it. MGT, who was the guitarist on The Night in Orlando, plays on it. He was in Peter's band with me, and the drummer, Mark Slutsky, also plays on it. Anyway, so we got this thing. We just finished it. We're like just starting to shop for a label now.
I will totally be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's been great.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Many thanks to David J. and Michael Donaldson. As always, thank you for listening to Spotlight On, a production of 23 Media Ventures. I'm your host and executive producer, Lawrence Purrier. We're produced, edited, and guest hosted by Michael Donaldson, with theme music by Q Burn's Abstract Message. If you'd like to support our work, please rate and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and then visit us online at spotlightonpodcast.com. There you'll find our free episode archive, weekly postings on our official blog, and a ton more. Thanks for listening, be safe, and stay in touch.